Okay, Dennis, I think now we can start. I see already a good number of you. It's just to start, thank you very much again for being here today. Let me briefly introduce myself. I'm Paula, researcher at the Joint Research Center in Seville. I work mostly on digital transformation in the public sector, including the scientific support to the Interoperable Europe Act. So today in this session, it's a part of a learning session of the Interoperable Europe Academy, and it's co-organized, as you see, with DIGIT, the Digital Policy Team, and GRC. And it mostly is building on the efforts that we have to provide scientific support to the implementation of interoperability assessments. And the main goal that we have here today in this peer workshop is to better understand the lessons learned and the challenges that are emerging from this early implementation and early experiences about interoperability assessments and everything that is related to it, for instance, the governance aspects and so on. So I think today we will start a bit, maybe if we go with the next slide, you will see a bit of the overview of what's in the agenda today. So first, we're going to have a brief introduction from Felicitas that most of you already know, that she's going to give us an overview, quick overview on the assessments. Then we're going to have Christopher presenting the Digital Ready Policymaking Network from member states. We'll also have some insights from Germany, Belgium, and Denmark. So thank you very much for joining us today and sharing your first experience and insight on the assessments. And then we're going to close with an open discussion on the that's going to be led by Stanislav, who is a visited researcher working with us now, coming from Leuven in Belgium, from the Public Governance Institute. So I think that will be all from my side. Please note that the session will be recorded as it is part of our data collection process, but also it's going to be shared afterwards if you want to share with other colleagues or revisit a few of the points that we're going to be discussing today. And again, also don't hesitate to share your questions throughout the session in the Q&A. So I think we can answer the questions either via the chat, or then we can pick a few of them for the open discussion at the end of the session. So once again, thank you for being here today. Special thanks to the different member states that are joining us to present the insights. And now I leave it to Felicitas.
Yes, thank you. I hope you can all hear me. If you go to the next slide, I think we can skip that one and immediately go to the content. I just wanted to give you a quick reminder of an overview over the interoperability assessments. I'm sure if you're here, this is not the first time you've heard about them, but just to do a recap, they're part of Article 3 of the Interoperable Europe Act. And they're intended as a kind of journey for a bit of a mindset change and to discover opportunities for more cross-border interoperability, in the sense that if you write new legislation or you set new binding requirements or you review other legislation, you actually think about cross-border interoperability from the beginning, and obviously share your insights and make them transparent in a report. But if you go to the next slide, please. You can see the legal obligation again. It tells you that before taking a decision on a new or substantially modified binding requirement, you shall carry out an interoperability assessment. What does that mean in practice? A binding requirement is anything that limits the choices left to others later on in the process. So if you set a binding requirement on a data format, that obviously limits the choice of others later on in the process, how data can be exchanged, how it can be stored, or how it should be managed. These binding requirements must concern a trans-European digital public service, which is a mouthful, I agree. It's not that easy to say all the time, and especially not 3 times in a row, but what it means is basically a service that requires the interaction across borders and interaction via networks and information systems, because we're talking about digital public services. And an example could be the exchange of diplomas, for example, or if you drive too fast on a highway in another country, the exchange of vehicle data. So actually the nice little letter reaches you and tells you to pay money to whichever member state you were speeding in. And then it's also very important to see this before taking a decision. So as I mentioned before, it should happen very early on in the policymaking process. And if you go to the next slide, here's a short summary. I don't know, for me, yeah, perfect, there it is. A short summary of the key considerations that should go into these interoperability assessments. I already mentioned the timing, to do it as early as possible. To make sure that you're actually the person responsible for the assessment, so the one actually setting the binding requirement. You don't have to do it if you offer a trans-European digital public service. You only have to do it if you set the rules for it. Like in data exchange in general, it should happen once only. So if an assessment has already been conducted, there's no need to repeat it. Throughout the assessment, you should consult with stakeholders, so the directly affected service recipients, for example, policymakers, yes, but also the people who have to implement it later on. And also if it's a service, for example, that has a front office component, it never hurts to actually talk to the people who use the service on a day-to-day basis, for example. And we also have a lot of measures of support in place. We wrote the guidelines. There's a space on the portal where you can access information, and we have sessions like the one today where we share first insights. And with that, I hand over to Christopher, I think, for the next part on the digital ready policymaking support network.
I think maybe, sorry to interrupt, maybe for Christopher or something. I don't know, Stanislav, if you would like to say a few words towards what you have to expect about things.
Yes, thank you. Thank you so much, Felicitas, for the excellent overview. And again, thanks for everyone to be here, especially to our speakers. The intention of this session was to kind of capture this early expertise and very early experience, actually, because we don't assume that it's very crystal clear from A to Z on how it's going on, what's happening. Maybe there are some very common bottlenecks that everybody is struggling with, but might be feeling a bit isolated from the rest. So in today's session, we want to see what different organizations are doing in terms of the assessments, where they are standing today, but also what challenges and lessons learned they already have, which they can share with the network. And to kick off, we do not actually start with a member state, but we start with the European Commission itself. So I think Christopher Olsen, directly representing the European Commission, so DG Digit, the B2 unit on interoperability, will give his presentation to kind of introduce this digital ready policymaking concept and how it might be relevant for the assessment. So Christopher, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much for that kind of introduction. And yes, that's my first slide. I would just start out. I will be relatively brief. I think we have a lot of interesting things on the agenda, and especially also a discussion. I would consider myself very much an observer in this session. I'm here to learn as much as most of you are. However, I've also been given the great opportunity to just provide a quick commercial break, if you will, or to make a little advertisement for one of the initiatives that might potentially benefit from the discussions and learning that comes out of this workshop. We want to explore the potential for a dedicated digital ready policymaking network for member states to facilitate the efforts of complying with the Interoperable Europe Act. If you could go to the next slide, I think I will just try to elaborate a little bit on the thinking behind that. Yes, we have had a really good presentation now of Article 3 and the obligations that it entails. I have done a little bit of digging in the Interoperable Europe Act and found recital 4, which is actually right up at front, but many people skip directly to the articles. Nevertheless, if you read the recital 4, you will see that it is mentioned at a structured cooperation in the aim of interoperability. It should support measures promoting a digital ready and interoperability by design policy setup. So for us, that is kind of a stepping stone to see that it makes sense to, when you talk about interoperability assessments, to also consider it in an overall framework of digital ready policy making. And I have a few more supporting slides just to elaborate on what I mean by that. If you could go on to the next slide, which is basically the European Interoperability Framework, as many of you here will be keenly aware of. It advocates a perspective on interoperability of layer-based, where, as you know, we're all familiar, I guess, with the concepts of semantic interoperability, technical interoperability, organizational interoperability. Oops, there's a little bit typo, my bad. But also legal interoperability, which in our view is relevant when you talk about digital ready policy making. If you actually then read what are the recommendations on the next slide, please, of the EIF relative to legal interoperability. Let's see. Yes. It is recommended that proposed legislation should undergo a digital check to ensure a lot of purposes or objectives are fulfilled. And in our view, this all speaks very much for at least considering when you go about in conducting or establishing a setup to conduct interoperability assessments, to also consider whether there could be some synergy relative to the concerns addressed through the concept of digital-ready policy making. And that's something we want to explore from the Commission side, whether there would be an interest in from the member states in participating in extension of these ongoing efforts. And I think on the next slide, it's a little bit clear what that entails in the short run. It was already mentioned that at the Commission we are already seeing that ourselves, that there is a lot of synergy in the sense that the processes we have designed to comply with the application to conduct interoperability assessments, they actually also support existing efforts that were put in place to inform the DGs and qualify the policy proposals with these digital-ready concerns and objectives. So the objective, or rather the approach we are taking at the Commission, does reflect this, and that's something we would be very eager to share the experiences of with member states, and also hear more about your experiences. And potentially this forum could also become relevant, could also be relevant for member states and practitioners who are considering whether it would be relevant for them to also incorporate digital-ready concerns into their approach to conducting interoperability assessments. Yes, and so again, next slide I think shows what are we considering doing in the short term. Again, sorry, this slide is the one that shows what purposes could a member state network usefully serve. So the idea is to draw upon the experience of existing member states who already have existing practices, but also to invite in member states who are digital-ready curious, if you will, or interested in hearing about those experiences. And then I think finally, what I've been teasing, the next slide, what are the relevant milestones to observe in our approach? We hope to reach out to member states in the coming months to ask specifically whether this is something that could be of interest to them, with a view to conducting a few specific workshops that are intended to serve both as pilots but also focus groups on how could a network be designed, and what content should be in it, what should be the focus of it, in order that it might give value going ahead. So in many ways, I would say that this is hopefully to start this work session. I think there's a lot of potential overlap in the audience here, and what we are intending to do in the longer term. So once again, thank you very much for the opportunity to be here and present what we plan to do in extension of it. One of the things we plan to do in extension of it. And I think from here on, I will simply be, well, you're more than welcome to reach out to me bilaterally, of course. I think my contact information is on the next and final slide. And in addition to that, I will be staying here and listening to the discussion, and hopefully learning a lot from it. So once again, thank you very much for the time given to me, and I wish you all a good workshop.
Thank you so much, Christopher. And I'm sure if there are any questions, the participants will put them in the chat or in the Q&A via the Slido. So if you go to apps, then there will be this Q&A. And without further ado, I think we're ready to start with our first speaker. So the first country is Denmark, and the presenter, Dennis Lund, working for the Agency of Digital Government in Denmark. So he's a senior advisor of Office of Technology and Data, and they will be presenting on, what's happening in their country, how is it going with interpreting the assessment so far. So Dennis, if you are ready, we are ready.
Thank you.
Oh, wait a moment. I think it's Germany. Wait a moment. One moment. Sorry. I think we can start with the... Yes, if you don't mind. I'm sorry, I had these changes. So Benedict, do you hear us?
Yes, I do.
Yeah, we can start. Yeah, my apologies for this. We can start with, Benedict, working for the Digital Service, the agency supporting the federal government with all affairs related to digital transformation. And let's hear from you.
Also Tabea Grunewald, working for the Ministry of Interior. I think she's here as well.
Hello, Tabea. Good to see you.
I think you kick it off, right?
Yes, exactly. Yes. just a few words from my side for the beginning before I hand over to Benedikt. Yes, hello, my name is Tabea Grünewald from German Ministry of Interior. And yeah, we are currently, of course, in the national implementation of the IEA, and we are in the fortunate position actually that we built the assessment process on an existing process. Our digital check in Germany has been established since about 2 years now. And it ensures that legislative proposals can be better implemented in the future. And what we are doing now in order to implement the IEA assessments is we expanding this digital checks with new criteria. And this is what we currently are doing. We just maybe some new reflections we had this morning because we presented the national implementation in our national once only network. It was actually very welcome that we actually built upon an existing process. People or public entities welcomed that we built upon this digital check actually, but nevertheless, of course, this topic or interoperability itself, it's very complex, and for public entities, it's very difficult to grasp actually and to get also the scope of the act. This is what we are currently struggling with. There's a lot of fear of additional effort, and also because legislative procedures often have to be adopted in a rush, it's also like there's a fear of this new additional effort. But nevertheless, we are kind of looking in a bright future with our hopefully soon to be a fully implemented new digital check. And with this, I want to hand over to Benedikt.
Yeah, thank you. Hello from my side. Benedikt Liebeck is my name. I've been together with the whole team of Digital Ready Policy in Germany working on this since the middle of 2022. So it's been quite a while, and it's quite an exciting change to incorporate now the interoperability assessment into this whole process. Some of you I know by name, or I know the pictures up there. So you probably have heard about our process. And I don't think I can change the slides myself. So next slide, please. Just to maybe start with the bottom line, because I'm not so sure if everybody is aware of the structure of Germany and this whole ecosystem we need to adapt and build this process on. As Tabea mentioned, we're interconnecting the digital readiness check with the interoperability assessment. And we do this in a surrounding of a structure with 16 federal states, and then, of course, the level above it. An often very diffused landscape of service implementation and coordination between state and local government levels. So we need to keep that in mind, because it's kind of like where it should go to, or where it should enable things. And we have, as you heard, a digital readiness check in place since beginning of 2023, and that is binding for the legislative process on a federal level, but not on the state levels. So we have kind of not a really one-size-fits-all approach to this, but different approaches, and we're kind of trying to align all the states now to the federal process to keep the bureaucracy on this one kind of small. And yes, we try to integrate it. So we try to integrate the process as well as the 4 levels of interoperability to make it one process of actually working on the basis of legislation and on the basis of decisions in a digital and interoperable mindset, I would say. What's our experience so far? We looked at the interoperability assessment guidelines, and actually doing an assessment for one entity on the federal level. And so far, so good. It's a lengthy but really good written process guideline with many helpful tips. And we really loved it, as we are like the acting national competent authority for Germany. But we also got the feedback during the process. It's too long, it's too broad for policymakers to, as Tabea already mentioned, to have it work in this sometimes legislative procedure that is rather fast than planned in Germany. So that's kind of a thing to keep in mind, and also for us a thing to keep in mind when we now merge those two processes together. And the other thing we always hear, which is probably a pretty German thing to say, but we need a translation and a German version of this document, because not everybody wants to read in English and then also in German and then try to them in English. And then again, the one other thing we always hear is try to adapt to X processes. Maybe some like background information on that one. And we have around 40 different checks that should be done during the legislative process. So that's quite a lot. And reality hits hard because not all of them are done. So we kind of need to like merge stuff together to synthesize different approaches with the same methods and somehow a similar goal in mind. And that's actually pretty cool for interoperability and the digital readiness things, because at the end, the goal is to have digital ready legislation to enable digital services that work better for everybody. So that's pretty great. What's lacking so far from our experience? Kind of obvious. We need real-world examples and best practices to show the positive impact. I know that's kind of the egg and hen problem. We need to start somewhere, and we're starting. But that's one thing we always hear when we talk to policymakers. Personally, we would like to see like an API to streamline the reporting, but I think there's some talks on that already, and some progress is already made. And then again, also Tabea already mentioned it, we have kind of a hard time, and it's a lot of work to actually get the information out there, especially to the 16 states and also in the federal German government. So every like marketing and information material that is targeted at policymakers and their problems is highly welcomed. Yeah, with that, next slide. I already mentioned that right now. Challenges are getting the right level of information to the right people, because we need to inform like the high level officials about why they should emphasize that this is done, because it could actually help them implementing their political goals. We need to inform the like middle management to actually free up capacity to do it. And then we need to inform practically every policymaker and everybody that works on binding decisions to comply with this, and get the word out that there is one more thing to think about, or at least that it makes even more sense to actually start early with a digital readiness check. Not a real challenge, but something we are kind of working on right now, and which is kind of hard work, is actually integrating the 4 European interoperability framework layers with our existing 5 principles for digital ready regulation, to have in the end one synthesized artifact, so we don't need to explain 9 different principle-like things. So this is one thing we kind of try to chew through right now. And then the other thing is reshaping our proposed method process to integrate the assessment and reporting tasks. So at the end, hopefully we only need to run through the process once for digital readiness and interoperability, to 2 processes. I'll share a little graphic with you in a couple of seconds about that. What are some lessons learned so far? The assessment report is rather focused on regulatory pieces. So regulatory pieces that are tightly linked to digital services. And that is something we often need to actually build awareness around in Germany, because that's kind of seen as 2 different parts. Like policymakers often think they are done if the policy is written, And then on the other side, and we know this as an implementation unit as well, we start to implement a service, and this interconnection and this actually interlinking of those two parts is still hard work. And we also, with our first interoperability assessment we fulfilled, it was quite a process because we had like a rather meta level policy, like a service standard and or a reference architecture. And that's kind of hard to assess because that's kind of pretty close to the like the 4 EIF layers by design, and that's then kind of hard to access on a, like interoperable framework. So just some lessons learned out of like our everyday business. So to wrap this up, just next slide, please. That's in German. I'm sorry for that, but I think there are a couple of tools out there. You can just take a screenshot and let it translate to your preferred language. This is kind of our two processes. So at the top, you see our digital readiness check process, and at the bottom, you see the assessment process of interoperability. And in the middle, you see the thing we are striving for, one process to actually start with like a pre-check if I need to do it, and if I actually need also to apply the interoperability framework to it. And then we run you through the working and methodology process of early stage policy making, not the policy writing, but like the policy making, to try to incorporate all the different ideas from the interoperability assessment as well as from the digital readiness world to actually create a digital ready and interoperable policy piece. And in the end, then there is this part that needs to be done because we actually applied in Germany to have a document to check against for digital readiness, but also to hand in the assessment in on the EU level. And just one more thing. Next slide, please. How do we do it so far? We so far, as I said, are still working on actually getting the word out there. So this is like a screenshot from our information page. I can post a link to that in the chat later. Again, translation services out there will probably help you read through it. There's no new information, but like information in German for policymakers targeted at their problems about how to comply with it so far, and trying to make transparent why it's actually useful and great to do it. So that's all of input I've got with me today. And
it's fantastic, Benedict. Thank you so much. And to Tabea as well. Thank you for presenting how Germany is doing so far. Are there any immediate reactions from our other speakers from Belgium, from Denmark, or maybe colleagues from Digit have any comments before we open maybe some floor to our audience? Do you hear something that is resonating with your experience so far, or something that is perhaps quite the opposite?
I have a question.
go ahead.
Thank you. So you mentioned that you have made a German translation of the guidelines. How much has it been adapted to German? Is it a complete rewriting of the guidelines, or is it? How much have you altered it?
Just to be clear, we have not done like a one-to-one translation of the guidelines. That's something we kind of hope that it will be actually provided by the EU. But we like some small parts we translated to like work in our team together with the policymakers, and it's not a one-to-one translation. It's more like getting the grasp or the idea of methods behind it over to the people. So, and like for the information page, it's kind of like condensing like the thick, rich information that is out there on the Interoperable Europe board and the assessment and in the guidelines and all the information material to something that like a policymaker can actually go through and like grasp in like a couple of minutes. So it's like more like information heavy site, but in chunks that are hopefully digestible by the policymakers. Still testing it. So it's like with all the stuff we do, it's kind of like the minimal viable approach. It's out there now, and we're trying to look at the numbers, how much time people spend on there, which questions arise, which comes back to us. So far, as you probably heard, we are in the process of getting like a new coalition in Germany. So the regulatory work is kind of slowed down so far for this year. So we don't really have many cases coming in, but that's going to change probably in a couple months. Does this answer the question?
Well, thank you so much. And I don't know if colleagues from Belgium have any questions or any immediate feedback, because I already see there are some other questions in a Q&A, but I wanted to give the floor for direct peer response.
No question so far. Just that we think that we should probably add someone from our ministry, but from another service, because I think they also will be interested in here. Thank you for the next time.
All right, and then Benedict, if you can stay with us for a little bit more. I see that there is a question in the Slido in the app. I can read it out for you. Can you explain a little bit more about the process you followed for the assessments you already conducted? Did the guidelines help you in the process? Yeah, what's your experience with that?
Sure.
Because you did mention it.
Sure. The short answer is yes, they helped. The little bit longer answer is what we did is actually it was a regulatory piece in a really late state in the whole process already. So it was actually already written in text and not in like the early phase where you can like shape the contents and the ideas behind it. So that makes it kind of hard to follow like each step of the assessment the right way. So what we actually did is to take the guidelines and run through the guidelines and try to reverse engineer or talk to those people writing the policy to actually get the information out of them. And then we drafted a really it's just like a Word document for the assessment, and then we noted down all our ideas in there and all our discoveries and impressions we had. And with that, rewrote the report. And I think it's still, so far, it's still pending with like our ministry side because there were some delays now, but some point in time it's going to be online on the portal. And that's how we did it for the first one. And we kind of like, it's like, again, like a minimal viable approach to the whole assessment process to see for us where do we need more information, where we can get away with less information, where we actually need information from like third parties. And so far, that was quite good actually with the assessment guidelines and also with the report on the portal, and also with the Interoperability Act and the amendment to that. So we looked at all these and then merged it all together. That's it. I don't know if that helps.
I'm pretty sure that this is
passed, we can probably share a little bit more details on that.
Thank you so much to you, Benedict, and also to encourage participants, if you have any questions or if something is unclear, do not hesitate to ask it in the chat or post it on Slido. So then in the end of the presentations, we'll have a little bit of a moment to discuss. So maybe some of the prominent issues which will be not yet addressed by our speakers, we can reflect there. So again, Benedict, thank you so much for sharing, and to Tabea as well. I think we're ready to move on with our next speakers from Belgium. So you can, I think, we have with us Evelina Wassenaar from University of Ghent, but also working on Digital Flanders, the agency of the regional government in Belgium. And I think, you're ready to present on what your country has been doing so far.
Indeed. Thank you, Stanislav, and thank you, the other colleagues, for organizing this peer workshop. It has been very interesting also for us to hear all the experiences with the interoperability assessments. If you go to the next slide. Yes, I want to start with a project that we actually submitted to be one of the first use cases here in Flanders to run through an interoperability assessment. Thus, unlike Germany, we haven't fulfilled one of the interoperability assessments yet. So what we did first is we wanted to identify some use cases to see how it would work and then share our best practices. So currently there is a project starting up named the Transborder Observatory. It's an Interreg project between France, Wallonie and Flanders. And so you see there are a lot of stakeholders, and what actually the goal of the project is that it would facilitate the cross-border cooperation between Flanders, Wallonie and France. And if you go to the next slide, yes, you can see that the aim of the project is to strengthen the cooperation between these several actors in terms of data. So we want to support and strengthen the dissemination of information, but also advise data along these different target groups. So actually, there is a need also for interoperability along several use cases. And so we thought that this would be the perfect use case to run this interoperability assessment on. But I will not go into much detail about this project because it's still starting up. So then if you go to the next slide, I want to give a bit of context of what we are doing in Flanders and also in Belgium. So for the ones, some more background information about Belgium. So Belgium consists of a federal state, then communities and regions, and they are all equal from a legal viewpoint. So this is a very interesting case because actually this is kind of a mini Europe. And in Flanders, we have then 13 years of experience in semantic and technical interoperability in the Oslo program. So we have worked together with also the SAMIC program towards these semantic and technical interoperability building blocks. And we also have set up a governance for the semantic and technical interop, and this is also adopted on the interfederal level. So this is why I mentioned our governance. So what is very interesting here is that we already have a governance framework that is running for the past 13 years now, and it has been working for the layers of the semantic and the technical interoperability of the EIF. And so what the challenge now is to integrate this interoperability assessment into the existing interoperability checks. So what we already have in place are self-assessments for checking interoperability, but also technical tooling for checking whether the semantics are in place or in line with what is proposed, and so on. And next to that, we also have a conformance framework and also some guidelines on how to publish and also make the semantic assets sustainable. So what is our expertise or experience? So we are now in the process of launching the Interoperability Expertise Center at Digital Vlaanderen. So this is actually in parallel with the launch of the Interoperable Europe Act. So this is very interesting that we are getting together at the same time. And what the next steps are is that we want to include the governance of the 3 NCAs. So in Belgium, for the ones who don't know it, we have 3 or maybe 4 NCAs that actually collaborate in this interfederal collaboration ISEG. And so then ISEG has adopted the governance framework of the Flanders. If you could then go to the next slide. So with regards to the use case of the observatory, so which is just starting up, we came together and we had a discussion on what would be the requirements for a successful assessment. And one of the first things we identified was the governance of the interoperability. And I will make it very practical. In the project, for example, it is not clear which entity should perform the assessment. And I saw earlier, and if you read the Interoperable Europe Act, it has been made clear that the one making the binding requirement should do the assessment. But in the case of the project, it has already been not so clear who should do the assessment. Is it France? Is it Walloon? Or is it Flanders? So that is one thing, the governance of the interoperability. So we should make it clear, and also the stakeholder coordination and participation. So which kind of profiles or organizations should be involved in the assessment. So there is a whole list of profiles who should be consulted, but yeah, some more guidelines or things would be helpful for us in the project. Then also a definition of roles and responsibilities. So who is responsible, I mentioned it earlier in the governance, but who is responsible for conducting the assessment, but also if it's like a collaboration like in the Interreg project, some roles could be defined on who will take which part, for example, when it's more focusing on the technical interoperability or semantic or legal or organizational, maybe some responsibilities could be divided between all the parties. And then also the maintenance of future-proof interoperability assessments. So this is also linked to the data model that has been in development by CEMIC on making the assessments machine readable, but also sustainable for the future. And also, if things changes in the interoperability assessment, when do we have to do new assessment? If, for example, another project reuses some of the solutions, should we then do another interoperability assessment and so forth? And could be linked towards the previous assessments. So it's a bit about making the assessments sustainable. So the lessons learned for our use case, I think are already also a bit mentioned earlier, but the early involvement. So the project was launched last year, and they had a work package on legal and policies. And so what they did is they put the interoperability assessment under that work package, but little did they know about how much it would cost to do the assessment, who should be involved. So I think early involvement and also to have it early in the project will make a huge difference. Also to estimate what the cost would be to perform such an assessment in such a project would be helpful. This also relates to the definition of the scope and objectives. So at the moment, the use cases of the project are not clear in the Interreg project, which makes it a bit hard to do already the assessment. Then also the multidisciplinary approach, as mentioned, the contribution of several profiles like we have in Flanders, so policymakers as well as technical experts, but also business analysts, we think is necessary to perform the assessment. And then, of course, building on existing frameworks and processes. So in Flanders, we already have our governance for the semantic and technical layers and the EIF. So we want to build further on that. Next to that, we also have our collaboration on the interfederal level on ISEC. So we want to build further on that and also integrate this assessment on that level. And then, of course, training and capacity building is something that is on the roadmap as well for the interfederal level, but also in Flanders. So that was what our experience are so far in Flanders. So I hope you can learn a bit from it, but please also ask our questions. I'll be happy to answer them.
Thank you so much, Eveline. And I see that the chat has become a bit more active also. So maybe I'll first give the space to colleagues from Germany and Denmark to react if something that you said perhaps was similar or different with them, and then we can proceed with the chat. I don't know this, or Benedict or Tabia, who has any comments.
First of all, thank you. I would be super interested if you could share like links to this self-assessment or the tooling, because that's something we also continuously work on. That would be probably inspiring. Love that.
Yes, of course, I can share it. Although all the documentation so far is, a lot of the documentation is in Dutch, but I think it's easy to translate.
I think we can translate that stuff by now.
Yeah, okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Dennis, did you want to ask a question? Because I see that you are unmuted.
Yes, thank you. I would like to begin with an appreciation and thank you for this introduction to how you are going about it. I think it's you're doing it quite differently from the way that we have been working with it in Denmark, and especially this pilot case is very interesting. I think, of course, the structure in Belgium is very different from the Danish. So I don't think that we would encounter the exact same obstacles that you have encountered, but many of the learnings that you have made so far translates directly to our experience and conclusions. So. But I agree with Benedict. Links to the resources would be very helpful. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And we can now see the questions from the Slido. So some of them already were upvoted, so we'll start with those. The first question is, could you explain more? How did you identify this project that is candidate to do the interoperability assessment? I assume because you mentioned in the beginning that you were choosing this use case, I think.
Yes, so this candidate use case or pilot case, it was chosen because we were contacted by, it's one of the projects that our other team members within Digital Founders are working on, and it was just launched, so we thought it would be an excellent opportunity to do the assessment on this project because it's a big project. It has been cross-border, so we thought that would be an excellent opportunity.
Thank you. And the next question also to you that has been also upvoted. What are the specific skills profiles that you foresee are needed for the performing the assessments in your experience so far?
Yes, so we have done a study a few years ago related to semantic interoperability and the profiles that come in touch with this kind of semantic interoperability. And actually we can see that we can also map these for the interoperability as a whole. So we did a survey with some policymakers, business analysts, and developers. So these were the three profiles that came out of the study, and then we did some qualitative research to make clear what their needs and requirements would be with regarding to interoperability. But this study is already a few years old, so we were thinking that we would start from these profiles to also include them and start from that as the possible target profiles for conducting this interoperability assessment and work from that on. So it's really, a more practical approach, but we have done some research in the past on this topic.
You're muted, Stanislav, so we cannot hear you.
Sorry, I'm sorry about this. I think this next question is also related to what you just responded. Who is involved in this interoperability center? So I think you mentioned in your slides.
Yes, so we are currently developing this expertise center of interoperability. And so for now, it's me, my colleague Ziggy, Justine, and Annelies. So we are starting with the four of us. I think we are still hiring some policy advisors, but it's a team with different kind of expertise. So we have more like community managers, but also more technical experts that we are acquiring in our expertise center. So it's really a mix of different profiles also in this center of expertise. But as I just mentioned, we launched the expertise center last year in September, so we are still in the progress of starting up. And we have also in Flanders all the interoperability solutions, as we call it. So we have the standardization program Oslo. We have the work that we have been doing on data spaces. So we all want to gather this and gather the expertise in this center of expertise.
Excellent, thank you very much. And I think just one final question before we proceed. I think it was also very much related to what you've seen, but perhaps some clarification is still needed. From the support and tools provided, including the guidelines, what do you think are the most useful to kick off the implementation of assessments? So I guess from what's available from the Interoperable Europe.
So what I think, because my expertise is in the semantic interoperability, I think the tools for making the assessments machine readable, I think would be very, very much appreciated. And also tooling to check compliance with regulations, but also with interoperability solutions. I think that would be very helpful. And also, of course, the catalog of solutions linked towards the catalog of solutions, linked to other solutions, linked to projects, and so forth. So I think that would be very useful.
Excellent, thank you very much. And I think we will have still some moment to reflect in the end of the presentations. And I'd like just to remind to the participants that we will share the slides after the session as long as the recording, so you can still access if you missed something that our speakers have shared. And now we are gladly moving on to Denmark. So again, my apologies for misinterpreting the order. So Dennis Jund will introduce the experience of his country based on what he has been doing in the digital agency in Denmark. So the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you. I would like to begin with an apology. I think, could you move to the first slide? Yeah, and this is my apology actually, because to be quite honest, I have been a little pressed for time in preparing the presentation for this workshop, so I completely forgot to use the templates provided by the team, and I'm sorry for that. So it's not organized quite the same way as the other presentations. And I would like to begin with a few comments that are not related to the slides, because inspired by the previous speakers, I think I would like to mention that we haven't actually performed any, to our knowledge, and I think I'm quite confident that it's true, that in Denmark no interoperability assessments has yet been done in reality. What we have been focusing on at the national level has been number one, to communicate with our national authorities, the ministries and the agencies, and we have spent a lot of time preparing a Danish guideline, not a version of the European guideline, but a Danish guideline for interoperability assessments. And there are two main reasons for that. And one is the fact that the European guideline, however good it is really good, I think. It is, though, primarily a guideline for setting up the processes and the governance structures around the interoperability assessments, and not as much a guide to a more practical methodology on how to actually perform an interoperability assessment. So that's the first reason that we wanted to provide our first thoughts and ideas as to how to actually go about performing an interoperability assessment. And secondly, we wanted to relate this obligation to perform assessments with our national architecture framework, which includes a number of principles and a number of principles that aligns very closely with the EIF and actually with the process and the goals of an interoperability assessment. And we would like to put some focus on the way that our authorities can use not only the EIF, but actually use our national interoperability framework that has been built upon the EIF as a gateway into, or a framework into figuring out how to structure and perform the interoperability assessment. So that's the second thing we have been spending a lot of time on. And the third has been preparing a project that is related to interoperability assessments, and an obstacle or a problem that we foresee might occur down the line when decision makers in the late stages of the life cycle of a digital public service begins to perform interoperability assessments. So what we imagined was if I'm managing a procurement process, for instance, in a region or a municipality, and I'm considering a binding requirement, would it then be easy for me to determine if that specific binding requirement has previously been assessed at the upper levels of the governance structure, i.e. at European level or national level? The assumption, I think, in preparing the Interoperability Act has been that would be quite easy and straightforward. But our assumption is that, in fact, in real life, it could be more murky and complex to actually trace a specific binding requirement back to the different legislations on both national and EU level that could be that might have been performing an assessment on that type of binding requirement before. So we proposed for the technical support instruments in DG Reform a project to develop a digital tool that would allow for vertical and horizontal traceability of assessments performed on binding requirements in an attempt to solve this problem and make it easier for the late stage decision makers to trace if a binding requirement has in fact been assessed beforehand. And lastly, number 4, and that is what my slideshow is actually about, we have been putting some effort into integrating into our well-established and consolidated digital-ready policy-making process a number of questions and checks that are related to interoperability assessment. So as we heard from Benedikt and Tabea in Germany, we have our first line of defense, so to speak, is our digital-ready policy-making process. And that's what I'm going to focus on in this presentation. But just to highlight that this is not the only effort that we have been doing in Denmark, but we have those 4 primary focus points that I have been speaking about up until now. But as to our integration between the digital-ready policy-making process and our assessment as to if a specific piece of draft for legislation is in scope of an interoperability assessment, well, that's what I'm going to speak about now. So please, the next slide, the first slide, actually. So, you know the background for this. so I won't go into this specific the first point in this slide, but the digital ready policy making process and this integration with the assessment, whether to perform interoperability assessments, is a coordination between the Digital Ready Legislation Secretariat in our Agency for Digital Government and the Office for Technology and Data. And the Office for Technology and Data, in which I am employed, is a team of architects. So in that office, we have specific IT architect competencies that will coordinate with and work together with the Digital Ready Policy Secretariat in order to identify binding requirements that might be in scope of an interoperability assessment. So please, the next slide. So this, as I mentioned, is our first line of defense in the governance structure of the Danish legislation process. So this is an early. The goal is to identify very early on in the legislation process if a draft for a legislation contains binding requirements that should be interoperability assessed. So we have a screening phase and where the Secretariat for the Digital Ready Policy Making process identifies potentially affected proposals, and they then include experts from the Office for Technology and Data to confirm or validate that a flag mentioning that this requirement might be in scope of an assessment is actually valid. And if that proves to be the case, an agency notification takes place. So we notify the agency or the ministry responsible for drafting the legislation that you might be considering a binding requirement in this legislation that perhaps ought to be interoperability assessed. And then we go into an early engagement with those policymakers in agencies or ministries to try to define the level of support that they would need in order to perform, or rather in order to first identify if it's actually relevant to perform an assessment, and then if it is, how to go about doing so, how to set up the team, how to decide upon the scale of the interoperability assessment and the actual methodology for how to perform the assessment. Yes, next slide, please. So the digital ready policy making process consists of a digital check with based on a number of principles and a number of questions that the Secretariat asks for each legislation. And the screening criteria that has been embedded in that process is twofold. The first part of the screening criteria is well, in fact, it's derived from the decision tree that is present in the interoperability assessment guideline from EU. So this is these four questions are basically the same that we find in the decision tree. So that's the first check for deciding if binding requirements in the legislation draft is in scope. And then there is a number of additional questions on the next slide, please, that delves a little bit deeper. So that those are some helping questions for the team to decide if this is actually in scope of the interoperability assessment obligation. So the questions goes as follows. Does the proposal require IT development dependent on pending EU decisions? So those questions are in addition to the previous four. And number two, are existing Danish systems subject to adaptation requirements? And the third is, will new systems need to interact with the systems in other countries? And the last is there clarity around infrastructure and coordination needs? So they are meant as supporting questions to help the person in charge of screening the legislation draft decide if any of the binding requirements are in scope of an assessment. Next slide, please. So these questions does in fact integrate directly into some of the existing principles that has been present in the digital ready policymaking check beforehand. And those are these two principles, number 4 and number 6. So there is a principle that number 4 that goes like this: cross-system coherence through data and concept reuse, examine existing EU standards for reporting calculations, and so on, identify potential data exchange partners in other countries, and review overlap with existing solutions for EU regulation implementation. And it's obvious that those correspond very nicely with the questions that can be derived from the Act itself. And also the principle number 6 that goes like this: you should use public infrastructure, identify relevant data and infrastructure systems, assess coordination requirements between member states, and evaluate proper integration with existing infrastructure solutions. So those existing principles ties very nicely into the goals connected with identifying the need for interoperability assessment of binding requirements. Next slide, please. So the process that will be initiated in integration with the digital ready policymaking process is as follows. So the first step is the actual screening of the legislative program, which consists of approximately 250 drafts for legislation that is collected once a year in May, and then delivered to the Secretariat for the Digital Ready Policymaking process, and they screen this program. And then by the process I mentioned before, they will be flagged. They will flag potential binding requirements in each of these legislations, and from those screening processes, an IOPA list will be generated. So from these 250 legislation proposals, a short list of those containing binding requirements that might be in scope is generated. And with that list, the Secretariat, together with the Office for Technology and Data, performs a workshop where we evaluate which of these proposals should actually be flagged for the responsible agency or ministry. And when that decision has been made, a final determination has been made, that the various ministries and agencies are notified with an email stating that you are considering a binding requirement in this proposal that should be considered for an interoperability assessment. The actual decision of whether to perform an assessment is left to the responsible agency or ministry. That decision is not taken by us. We are only advising that this could potentially be in scope. So it's a supporting mechanism for our agencies and ministries, the lawmakers in those agencies. So they get this notification, and then we offer our support. So we enter into a dialogue with them to discover which level of support would they need in order to decide if an interoperability assessment is needed, and then perform it if it is needed, if they decide that it is needed. Because the competencies, the resources are very different from agency to agencies. Some are well equipped with IT architects and IT specialists, and some of the agencies and ministries are very much not. So our support will differ depending on their level of expertise. All right, next slide, please. And this is, I think, the last slide. I won't go very much into this. The only thing, this is the legislative process in Denmark described as a timeline. And what it displays or shows is that we have a window from May and until October in which all legislations that has to be decided upon in the following parliamentary process is in process and are in draft before they are laid up in front of the parliament. And in this window, we can work together with the agencies and the ministries to perform the interoperability assessments. So from now and until, or rather from January and until May, we will focus on developing the methodology and release the guidelines. And then when we get to May in a month's time, we will have the tools ready for the ministries and agencies to actually be able to perform the interoperability assessments. Right. I think actually there is one last slide, but I won't go into that because yeah. So this is just a list of benefits in this early detection approach. So with that said, I think I'll open the floor for questions.
Thank you very much, Dennis. And I think the difference in format did not prevent us from getting all the insight that you have gathered. So the interoperability at its finest. There are quite a few of comments that were sent throughout your presentation. So I assume some of them you already mentioned. I think we can start from the top. How did you come up with the screening criteria? And there was also another question about the criteria, I think. Yeah, but maybe you can already start explaining, because you mentioned that you have this beautiful table with different criteria.
Yeah, well, I think there's two parts of that question. The screening criteria for the interoperability, related to the interoperability assessments, was developed in a workshop in cooperation between the Office for Technology and Data with the IT architects and the Secretariat for Digital Ready Policy Making. And as you can see from the table, it is strongly influenced by the decision tree from the EU guideline, and then some supporting questions that are only actually casting light upon the primary questions was developed by the Digital Ready Policy Making team.
And then the follow-up question immediately is related to whether the assessments, the screenings are done manually or do you use any other tools? Also, the question from the chat.
There is both a manual process, but there is also there is an element of automation. So there has been a script written that performs an initial screening of all the texts automatically.
And then how often will the screening process be done? Annually or more frequently? Claire is asking in the chat.
The screening process is initiated in May, in the beginning of May, when the legislative catalog arrives. So in Denmark, all legislations that will be put before Parliament is collected in the beginning of May from all the agencies and ministries at one time. And then a collective screening of those proposals can be performed.
Thank you. And
I think in that regard, I think the Danish legislative process differs a little bit from many other countries in that almost all legislations that goes through Parliament has been prepared by agencies and ministries. So that makes it quite easy to set that screening process in motion. And other countries I know is not that centralized, and many legislation proposals are coming from opposition parties and so on, and that is not very often the case in Denmark.
Thank you. And maybe to really stimulate a little bit the interaction with our other presenters, I think the question was also addressed to Germany and Belgium. Do you also apply screening questions as the ones proposed by Denmark, or additional checks before implementing the assessments? I think you probably have already mentioned a little bit in your slides, but I guess to follow up on what has been just presented.
I simply didn't get the question. What is the question?
I think the question is related to Germany and Belgium's experience, whether they have also applied some similar type of questions in the screening or some additional checks. Just to make sure we summarize this clearly.
Yes, I can jump in on that. First of all, thank you so much, Dennis, for this awesome presentation. I'm always so jealous about your whole policy process and how structured and non-chaotic that is, because that's totally different in Germany, because we don't know when a policy proposal will arise and then actually will make the journey through the ministries to the parliament. But back to your question, if we do also screening, we can't, because our process is a little bit more chaotic. But what we try to do with the digital readiness check and also with the interoperability check is to have like a pre-assessment that you do right at the start of a policy process. So you run through it. I also posted a link to that in the chat. It's like 6 super easy questions, really similar to Denmark. That was great to see, actually. And in the end, you get a small site that actually reminds you to keep in mind and prepare the policy digital ready and interoperable, with some links to resources and a way forward. That's how we do it. I would be super interested in how Belgium does it.
Yes, so I think in Belgium it's a bit similar to Germany. We also don't have such a structured process yet, so really looking forward towards learning from your experiences also. But how we do it in Flanders, we are working on a data maturity scan, and so we're also integrating this in towards that process. So that's how our approach is at the moment. I think we will also take other measures, but for now, this is how we will proceed. But I can definitely see how I should maybe get also in touch with some colleagues who are more into the policy making, and also have them take a look at this process, because I really like that. For now, we have process and methodologies for reaching interoperability on the semantic and technical layers, but for the policy making itself, we have a few things in place, but it's not as structured as this. So it's very incredible to see.
I don't know, Dennis, if you have any immediate feedback. Thank you so much, Emeline and Benedict.
Yes, thank you for the comments. I just noticed a written question that goes, have you already identified some cases, services that will need to go through the assessment? If yes, how? And the answer to that is both yes and no. We haven't identified any legislations up front, because those legislations will not arrive until May. But what we have done is identify 4 previous legislations that, if they were to come in May, they would probably be in scope for the interoperability assessment. And those 4 legislations will be used, and have not yet been, but will be used in order to perform a pilot interoperability assessment to help us develop a methodology. Thank you.
Thank you to all the presenters. And I think I see one of the participants has their hand raised. I wonder if this is related specifically to Dennis' presentation, or you have a more general question. Vanessa?
Yes, good afternoon. Thank you, Dennis, Benedict, and Evelyn for your presentations. I raised the question in the chat. I would like to ask Evelyn about this is technical and semantic. Thank you for your presentation, Dennis. Greetings from the other side of the bridge from Sweden. And as I understand, in Denmark, is it more centralized, the procurement and decisions into the technical? In Sweden, we have more kind of federated decision-making process. I wonder about if you have conducted any assessment towards the organizational aspect and layer of interoperability, what enhances in between, for instance, different kinds of, infrastructure and the social wellness, what anything that is in between interorganizational interoperability in Denmark, or if you have any other case in Flanders or in Germany, organizational interoperability aspects, if it's any assessment or progress working about how to assess the organizational interoperability that, in hand with the technical and semantical and other layers. That's my question. Thank you.
Maybe Vanessa, yeah, I can also.
Go ahead, please.
No. So last year, Vanessa, in Belgium, we had a project running with Italy. It was a Marigraph project together with Giorgia Lodi. And what we did there, we didn't do an assessment on organizational interoperability, but we aimed towards coming to some framework or some best principles and guidelines to come towards organizational interoperability. And so what we did is we started from the frameworks on governance that we currently have, so both in Belgium or Flanders and in Italy, and then we compared them and we made a nice report, I think, on how these two relate to each other. So if you are interested, I can definitely share. It's not an assessment, but it's like, some general guidelines that we could distill from it. So I can definitely share it.
Thank you.
I can just thank you for the question. It's a really good one because it's actually one I have also written down for like the discussion section. So far, that's like the one layer we struggled the most with, to be honest. Also struggled the most with to like interconnecting it into the 5 principles. Because to our experience, that is often something that is not done on like a policy level, but more like on the, like, I would say, agency level when they implement the policy. So that's like way later in the whole process and often not tightly interconnected with like some binding requirement. Still, it's something to consider and to actually build up on, because most policy pieces are not a greenfield approach, but based on something else that has already been there. So what we try so far is to trying to like interconnect it with our strong focus on visualizations when we do digital readiness checks, but that's just our first approach, and we're still like in a really early learning phase for that. So I don't know, how do you do it, Dennis?
Yeah, thank you, Benedict. Well, perfectly in line with what you say. Organizational and legal interoperability is one of the, I think, the most difficult aspects of interoperability to actually propose a methodology for assessing and also for creating or securing interoperability on these 2 levels. But it is, I think, also perhaps the most important. I hear many comment that at that particularly on the regulatory level, legal and organizational interoperability is the primary barrier to interoperability, and not actually semantic and technical aspects. That becomes a barrier in the later stages. But when we are on the regulatory level, it is the legal and the organizational interoperability that should be in focus. Also because many agree that the best practice in lawmaking is to avoid baking too many specific technical requirements into the legislation, and that leaves the legal and the organizational requirements. So we need to be able to provide a thorough, qualified methodology for how to expose those interoperability issues, and to guide our agencies or our lawmakers to how to address those barriers into the legislative texts.
Yes, maybe I want to add something. I completely agree, Dennis, and indeed, the legal and the organizational interoperability are the two more difficult layers. And what we learned in the project last year together with Italy, with regards to organizational interoperability and the governance of it, it was that there was a need to come towards a set of guidelines, but it differs so much for each member state, and also regarding the use cases, it's not so easy to come towards this streamlined process or method. So this was one of the findings we had, but nevertheless we could came to some principles that are also used in Interoperable Europe to reach this organizational interoperability. But I agree, it's definitely not easy. But I think there is a need for a structured way of governance for this organizational layer, and also the legal one. Yeah.
Thank you for your answer. I have seen in research that is the most difficult to achieve. The technical semantical has done with, and then there are some mixed approaches that has been done in one article that I got. But thank you for your insights. Look forward development.
And from our side, we would like to thank our speakers for all these engagement presentations, but also the discussion. We sort of wanted to see if we can facilitate it, but I think it grew organically very well. And to respect the timing, I think would be appropriate for us to slowly proceed with the wrapping up of this session. So again, we had 3 wonderful presentations from member states, but also from Krista from the European Commission side, where we've learned about, I think the term digital ready policymaking has been mentioned a lot and how it's relevant for the interoperability assessment. So I think the follow-up discussions on the portal will be very much related to this. So before we proceed with the colleagues from Digit and the Academy to present the agenda for the upcoming events, do the speakers have any sort of final conclusions based on the discussions we had, based on the interactions, and also for every participant presenting and attending in the chat, we're happy to hear your.
I don't know if I have lost Stanislav or.
Hello?
I see you there. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Or maybe perhaps from Benedict, if you have any concluding remark from your side, or Evelina, I don't know.
Just thank you for initiating this and actually bringing us all together. That was quite insightful from our perspective, and I hope for everybody else as well.
Yes, also from our perspective, it was very, we learned a lot. And I think we are also still in the early phases. We also didn't complete an interoperability assessment yet. But looking forward towards moving with this topic and also integrating the interoperability assessment in our existing procedures and frameworks. So thank you for organizing and facilitating this discussion.
Dennis?
Yes, I'm sorry, I just lost power there a moment, so I wasn't online. But I would, of course, also like to thank you for this workshop and for the opportunity to present from Denmark. And mostly, I would like to thank the other participants for the input. It has been very inspirational. So I look forward to seeing the results and also the supporting material and reference material from the other speakers. Thank you.
Yes, and indeed, since you mentioned the results, as this is a part of the research that is also done by the Joint Research Center, we invite other organizations that are currently considering assessments, doing the assessments at any stage to reach out to us. I will place the email in the chat, in the comments, that we will invite you for a brief interview where we'll try to ask a bit more detailed questions on how this process is going, what are the difficulties so far, how the guidelines and the materials have been useful to you, and then we'll be happy to report all our findings with the community. And I think to close up, let's ask the colleagues from the Interoperable Europe Academy to present more events on where we can learn and receive help.
Good afternoon, everyone. It's been a truly inspiring session. And since I believe that you all enjoyed it, we wanted to, of course, let you know about our future upcoming initiatives, because those are other opportunities for you to get to know each other and also share best practices that can be useful for others. So for those of you who don't know us, just a very brief description of what we are. We are the Interoperable Europe Academy. I'm Iphigenia. I work together with Bernard and Mariana in the same team. The Academy was founded in 2019 with the objective of developing civil servants' competencies by providing e-learning courses and live trainings on interoperability and digital skills. And as of today, we have more than 30 courses that you can enroll in. We also cover the different layers of interoperability, and we invite you to check it out because we are currently working on ensuring that our materials are as useful as possible for you, because you are our main target audience. So if there's something that you would feel that we could still do better, please don't hesitate to let us know. So this is a part of our initiatives. We were hosting webinars, these learning sessions, but also we have our peer learning policy briefs. And then as of next steps, what we can expect is the publication of more e-learning courses, creation of 4 more learning paths, translation of e-learning courses as well into different languages, but also we are planning to develop 1 interoperability certification. So as of exact next events and when you will be able to join us in the next months, we had our first learning session today. So thank you so much for joining us and for being so active. We have 2 more upcoming learning sessions on GovTech and regulatory sandboxes, but also we are planning to host lectures at universities, starting first by the topic of what is interoperability. And we're expecting this to happen in May this year. But since we want to ensure that we foster collaboration, we are inviting you and all the relevant higher education institutions, if anyone is interested, to share what topics they would like to hear more on in universities. And we are very happy that last Friday we opened the registration for our annual seasonal school that will be taking place from the 13th to the 15th of May in the mornings in a virtual format. So you're all invited to join us, since you can easily do that by joining us online. We will be following more or less the same format, and just to let you know about potential topics, we are still going to discuss about the latest updates on interoperability assessments, but also GovTech and the regulatory sandboxes. You will have also the opportunity to network among each other and ask your questions. So it can be a great learning opportunity for all of you. And last but not least, we have our 10 peer learning policy briefs in which we showcase particular examples from member states and different levels, be it local, regional, or national, that might serve as inspiration to others so that they can also create interoperable solutions. So I think this is all from our side. We have, of course, more coming, more peer learning policy briefs coming up, but I invite you to connect with us and continue being so active as just you were today. So thanks so much, and I give back the floor to my colleagues in case they would like to share anything else.
Well, it can only mean that everything was clear and everybody is excited to jump on board. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Have a nice day, all. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.